Everybody's teaching on Zoom these days, teaching online. And what are some best practices for creating community even when you're not exactly in the room? All right, everybody, so over the last couple of years, we've seen this huge increase, of course, in online yoga teaching. And that trend is here to stay, right? So many of us, even if we're teaching in studio again, are continuing to teach our classes online. So how do we do it? How do we build community online in the same way that we can do in a studio? In this video, we're going to look at some tips and some strategies that we can use as teachers to really enliven our online teaching and communities. All right, well, some of what we do with online teaching, guys, I'm going to say some things that are probably going to be no-brainers. It's the same kind of stuff that we would do in a regular studio. But when we're online, we want to be a little bit more vigilant about it. After all, people aren't going to a studio and having, studio staff there to welcome them. Online, it's your Zoom room and you're the one who's hosting. So a couple of obvious things that we can do is, hey, arrive early, right? So, turn on your video 5 minutes before class, say hi to people, remember their names, find out how they're doing, check in. Like have people give you like a thumbs up, thumbs down, or check in and say, hey Nancy, how's the weather where you are? Taking that time to connect one-on-one with students and to say hello is just like in-person studio classes, really important for helping students feel like, hey, you're there for them and there to help them and to help serve their practice. Same thing, super obvious, but stay afterwards for questions. A lot of times students, might not want to interrupt the flow of an online class by kind of raising their hand and going, hey, so stay afterwards and say, hey guys, hang out, I'm here for 10 minutes. I mean, you can create a boundary around it, right? But stay afterwards and chat with your students and make sure that no one has any questions. Be the last person to leave the room, right? And say bye to everybody. Like take a moment to give some shout outs and use people's names and say hello. The second tip for teaching online, and this might be attractive to some of you and obvious to others or not, but don't demo. So it's super tempting to get on your mat and demo the whole class, which immediately cuts you off from your students. So when I teach a Zoom class, I teach from right here. Hello, everybody, right? Teach close up. So that way you can look at students and you could say, Amber, awesome work. Step your feet back a little further in downward facing dog. You would be amazed at how much you can see in their practice. And it's really easy to give verbal assists or just, positive praise like, Aaron, awesome work with your warrior two, that's looking really strong. These little check-ins let your students know that they're being seen. Also, you've probably noticed that if you're taking a class and your video is on, you're more likely to be present if the teacher is here and looking at you than you will be if they're just demoing from their mat. Now, that isn't to say that you can't demo from your mat sometimes. Sometimes we got it, or you want to show something or demonstrate something, but once you get them going, come on up here and watch your students so that they feel seen and they feel like the space is held for them, even online. There are some really awesome things actually about Zoom that we can't do in person that Zoom lets us do, which is great. And here's some tips for working with the Zoom room, if you will. One, if you're not going to demonstrate the entire class, which you're not, right? Because you're going to watch your students and make them feel seen, then you could always have a student volunteer be your body demo, right? So I could, talk to one of my regulars before class, send them a little direct message on the Zoom and say, hey, Alicia, would you mind being my body demonstrating so people have someone to follow along if they get confused? And Alicia could say, yeah, sure, I'm into it. And then you could spotlight her for the class while you're talking people through it so that someone has somebody to look at. So if you got a newer student in class, they can look up and see Alicia doing the practice rather than you. And the great thing about Zoom is that, hey, you can spotlight two people. So if you're going to be demonstrating occasionally, you might spot yourself and her. So those are just some options that you can use. So if you want to give people someone to look at, you can choose somebody, right? Now, in terms of this personal interaction, just like in the real studio room, not everybody wants to get verbal feedback, just like not everybody wants hands-on assists all the time. So the great thing about Zoom is that people can, one, turn off their videos on you, which, you know, I'm a fan. If someone wants to come to class, keep their video off, they need some quiet time, but they want to be there, I'm all for it. I've done it, and sometimes you just want to be there but don't want to be seen. No problem. You can turn your video off, or sometimes what I say to my students is, if you want to be in the room here but you don't want to have verbal assist today, you'd rather just have your own space to practice, just rename yourself and put a little NA, no assist, by your name so I know. No problem, right? So then as I'm looking around my Zoom room, I can see like, oh, Terry prefers no assist today, so I will let them be. So this ability to name ourselves in Zoom is super helpful, right? And also, that means you can know everybody's name, which is also total bonus, because I know, like when I go to the studio and I'm teaching a new class, it might take me a while to get everyone's name. Hey, in Zoom, it's right there for you. So super easy to say, hey, Sebastian, nice work with your Virabhadrasana 1. Wow, you really got that back heel rooted. When you're giving your verbal assist, just as a side tip, even when you're just saying something that's good, like, hey, awesome work, Nadine, that looks really excellent. I think, and this is just like an aside tip, but being specific about what you see that's great can even be just like add that much more yumminess to that verbal assist. So instead of saying, Nadine, looks great, I might say, Nadine, really strong work with your arms. Woof, way to get them straight. Just a little bit more specific, but still loving and wonderful. So there you guys go. There are some quick tips for how to create community on Zoom. 1, show up early, end early. Create the community by connecting with your students one-on-one before and after class, just like you would in a real studio. 2, refrain from demoing unless it's necessary. Instead, you watch your students, be the teacher, and give active feedback. Even just loving, supportive, awesome, I see you feedback is great. 3, take advantages of what Zoom has to offer, which is the ability for people to name themselves, the ability to highlight other students in the room. These things actually can make teaching a little bit easier. So there you go, you guys. There's my quick tips. If you enjoyed them, please subscribe for more tips, or if you have tips, I would love for our community and me to read them. Put them below. Tell me what is working for you in creating these amazing class experiences online. See you on the mat.